Okay, welcome class. Today I'm going to discuss how we're going to transition from the outline and the first draft. So as you can see here, we got the rubric. So this is important because this is how we're going to get the good grades in the class. So the total paper is worth 25 points, and there's 5 categories that will be graded upon, and each one you can get 5 out of it. So let's make sure that we do that. First things first is the main point, and this has to reflect upon the thesis and how everything falls back on the thesis. So that means each paragraph you're discussing one of the main points that goes back to it. So as long as the whole paper is connected to that thesis statement, which is about the prompt, then you'll get a 5. Next is support. So supporting examples, quotes, you can paraphrase, anything that will help define key terms. This will help bring out the claims and help elaborate and uh, be able to support what you're trying to talk about. So you want to put that in each paragraph of the body. Finally will be the paragraph, transitions, and formats. This one we're not going to hit too strongly up front about hooks and some of the other ways to do. We want to just keep the organization really clean. Each paragraph should be one idea. So we have introduction, our body, conclusion, and we'll get 5 points for keeping it clean. And each paragraph, one idea. Finally, will be the sentence structure, grammar, right? Check your spelling, make sure that all your stuff is turned in correctly. So with that, you can also just check your word choice because some wording, could be a little awkward the way it's put in. And finally will be MLA. I have this one to make sure that everyone follows the format. That's going to be a big structure this year. So make sure that you just double check with MLA format, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so next. All right, next, let me go to the top of this. All right, so here's going to be information that you guys are going to receive. This goes over the outline and the first draft. How can we transition? So the first main point is clarity. What is the point of the paper? It's all about how clear it is. Everything you do, all the sentences, your word choice, examples, everything has to do with trying to make your paper as clear as possible. And this means you have to explain to somebody who maybe has never read what you're talking about or might get really confused with a term that you use. So I'll go over all that, but clarity, that's your top thing. So the prompt we talked about in class, which is great. For our first paper, what makes Gilgamesh a literary hero? So it's important to form a thesis, and then everything will go into the thesis, all the things that we want to talk about. So we just want to make sure that everything answers this. Okay, first let's get into the outline. A lot of you guys are doing really good. I'm seeing a lot of great work. So introduction. First is the hook. We're not focused too much on the paper of this one. Hook is one of those things that is nice, can grab the attention of the reader, but it's not something that needs as much focus in the beginning. You can kind of add this in towards the end. A lot of people kind of go for like shock value or something like that, but a really good hook, it's best to just keep it simple and focus on the genre that it has to do with. So you don't want to set up some mysterious, dark tone to something that's like a poetry that's more lighthearted. It won't really fit within the structure. So since Gilgamesh is an epic, you can put a hook that sounds sort of epic and a little, maybe even cheesy. It would sort of fit in there. Another way you can do is do a quote from the book that maybe helps lead the reader into what's like a main point about things. Another thing is quotations. You can quote someone really famous, and you're like, yeah, that quote sounds really nice, and goes in. But you can just keep it really simple. Next, define the main points. This is your thesis. Thesis is important. If you're having trouble writing paragraphs later and some of the ideas going on, come back to the thesis. It may need to be changed, or you may need to correct the wording so that everything comes together. And finally, just describe anything else that you're going to want to be talking about. And since we're not using a whole bunch of sources here, this can be kept pretty simple. We're just the Epic of Gilgamesh. We're just referring to the textbook at this point, so we can keep things really concise. Next is for paragraphs. For the most part, 3 body paragraphs will help keep things really simple and straight to the point. But if you are in your thesis and you have 2 main points and they're really strong and they take up the word count that you need, then yeah, you can do 2. Or vice versa, if you're able to say things clearly, but you're not making the word count, then 4 paragraphs would be fine too. And then make sure you claims defend the thesis, right? Each sentence that you start with should open with a claim. You're claiming something about the thesis. For instance, Gilgamesh is a literary hero because of the battles, right? His victory over these conflicts and battles. And then define the key terms. So this is things like using the example when you talk about victory, maybe you need to define within the text what that kind of victory looks like. Is there some sort of effect of that victory? Things like that. If you use the word like gods, this is where you want to define what kind of gods, right? We're talking about Mesopotamian type gods. So this is a good chance to make sure that the audience, the readers know which terms, like what's the context? How is it used within the text so that we're really clear about where we're going. And then supporting examples, you can quote them, you can just paraphrase them. Either way, just talk about the text a little bit. And the big one is critical analysis. This is the most important section, but we'll get more into this over time. Right now, we're just sort of dipping our hands in the water. We're not going below the iceberg too much right now, but just enough that we can kind of make the connection between the hero, the story, and the importance that it has of reading it even today. And finally, conclusion, be your shortest paragraph, summarize, and on a final thought, a kind of verdict, something that you've kind of concluded about all of this. Keep it really simple and just be careful not to add in some big statements at the end because then you would need to defend those claims. So you don't want to just add something that wasn't in your thesis. You still want to keep in the conclusion connected to that because otherwise then you'll have to keep writing more and you just better to edit out. Okay, so this is a basic concept of the outline. Now, I'm going to talk about chat a little bit, ChatGPT. So I use chat to help generate an outline for me as an example. Now this is the prompt. This is what I wrote. You can see my little icon there. So this is what I wrote. Oops, about it. So I put the prompt in and then I further describe it. Now, the best thing to use AI for is you really want to hone in on describing things because it can get really general. So it really helps to say, hey, I want this in the first sentence. I want this in the second sentence. I want you to give me an example. I want you to do this. And critical analysis, you might have to edit that because again, it's just going to kind of give you something maybe a little too vague. Also, one of the things I noticed that it didn't define keywords quite as well. Sometimes it elaborated, but other times it was really just like the first sentence. It was just kind of restating the claim. So you'll want to edit those kinds of things. But it looked at generally nice. Another big thing that was kind of funny, I wanted to check out the tone. So this is where you can tell chat, give it a certain tone or voice, and it will change the word choicing to reflect that. So I chose, an epic poem by a high school student, though, and so it gave me certain words that were pretty funny. The first time I did this, it was a little over the top, but it was pretty funny. So this is, this is the title it gave me, The Heroic Odyssey of Gilgamesh and the Annals of Literature. I would probably go and change, Odyssey, because I think that this title is a little wordy. It's a little flowery. But the Annuals of Literature is fine. It's saying that, yeah, throughout literature, it's a story that stands out. So it's okay. And then it gives me a hook. We'll be adding these in. And you can see from the word choice that it has some interesting types of, yeah, behold, Gilgamesh, a true literary hero. So you can see it's like almost like somebody who's standing on some kind of box or in town square proclaiming how great Gilgamesh is. So, I wouldn't keep all of the wording here for sure. I want to put it in my own words, but some of it was interesting to capture that kind of tone. It gives you some selection of what you can talk about. So, and here's the paragraphs it starts going into. One really popular one is his lineage, right? His godliness, the 2/3 and the 1/3 mortality. So that's a big one to talk about. Let's see. Yeah, some of the terms will change. But I did like how it was a symbol of the heroic potential within us all. That's not a bad critical analysis, that you can kind of come to the idea that, what Gilgamesh was able to accomplish was sort of a symbol for what people can do, what other kings maybe can live up to. They're trying to accomplish similar indeed. And then here's some general deeds about his, um, right? Vanquishing of Humbaba. So that was a big one. So that was nice supporting detail, talk about his courage. And that's also, again, something that maybe you might have to define. What does it mean to be courageous within the context of the Epic of Gilgamesh? Yeah, and so it gave me some statements, things to work with. So it's kind of a neat little outline to do it. Yeah, so several points. Make sure that one of the big things that I did was I did the tone, but I also told the vocabulary to be at a high school level. So you can allow the word choicing to fit within our class, so that you're not getting caught up in a lot of word selection that you yourself don't commonly use, because then it will not help you to create the paper within your own word choice. So yeah, so this is one of the things. It didn't define it as well, so I would go in when I wrote it myself and define, right? Divine lineage, what is it talking about? Now, another thing you could do is not just talk about 2/3 God and stuff, is it does mention his parents. So you can also mention his parents as a form of example to further define his lineage and his demigodness. And here is a rough sort of couple sentences, like as a first draft, as what I set up. So the divine lineage of Gilgamesh, 2/3 God and 1/3 mortal, sets up that Gilgamesh is a literary hero because it gives him supernatural strength and wisdom to accomplish tasks mere humans would not be able to do. And I can pick many terms in here to define. I can define, what do we mean by supernatural within this context, strength and wisdom. The strength and wisdom comes from one of the texts, so I would use that as a support. I'd use that quote like right in there. I chose to talk about, what does it mean by gods. So I said, by gods, I mean this connection to the Mesopotamian pantheon of gods found in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So connecting it back to the culture. Next, let's get into the first draft. What are we going to do about the first draft? How does it look? So from here, we transition from bullet form or just questions or rough thoughts to actually forming our sentences one after another. And this is not exactly how it should look. This is still just a breakdown of what each part should be. So keep in mind that this whole thing is going to be 250 to 300 words. So we'll go through all of that. So thesis, really important. What things are we going to talk about? So the body, remember the first sentence is the claim. Then we want to define any key terms. Then support, right? These will back up our claims. Like, this is why we're claiming this, because we can see this in the text. Make sure that you're using MLA format if you're quoting something directly from the text. And of course, chat can help you do a little research if you're trying to look up maybe how to describe something. And the big one, critical analysis. This is something I wrote a few examples myself that we can check out. So we can look at those. So let's see. So describe how Gilgamesh, being two-thirds God, is a symbol for being able to accomplish more than most people and helps the reader understand the importance of the supernatural parts of the story. So it's really simple critical analysis that the main reason why he is not just mortal is it is a connection to the supernatural parts, the gods having a part in the story and how events got changed because of their interaction. So, and I could probably even talk about the gods' interaction with another sentence even further, and that would really help bring out my analysis. So that would be good. And then last part, conclusion, your final thoughts. Um, I just ended on he is an example of courage for other literary heroes that are written after him. So just giving a brief example of just the fact that other literature, reflects other heroes also, and that he himself being an early one, the oldest that we have written, that we can see that connection. And the claim again here is not the goal here is not to give something more that we need to really go into. It's just to kind of give a final thoughts. So keep it really simple. Okay, let's see. Let's talk about the order of paragraphs. When we are writing our first draft, this is a chance to switch things around and switch it also in the thesis. Always go back to the thesis and change it if you're changing up your paragraph. So I have a few ways that we can do this. One is order of importance. The first paragraph should be your strongest point, whatever you think you have the best evidence or the most passionate thing that you want to talk about. Put on the first paragraph. Then the second is something you're have less maybe information or won't be as long. And then finally, the third might be the weakest. That it helps add to Gilgamesh being a literary hero, but it's not the most important thing that I need to see first. The next method is the chronological. This is you can write your paragraphs that as they appear in the story. So you can take a more story-driven approach. That each paragraph this is what something happened at the beginning of the story, the middle, and then the third paragraph of the body can be something towards the end. Some final thoughts on the character. So in this way, you can transition in a very chronological way that events unfold in the story. So that will help give your sentences structure. The last one, and this might be a little harder on this paper, but a systematic approach would be the first paragraph would be some very broad concept. And then finally, the third paragraph would be something very detailed. And the reason why you'd want to do this approach to things is that when you give out your paragraph of the detailed one, it might be so complex that starting with it might be a little too much for the reader. You need to build into it. You need to show some evidence of things before it, before you just make the claim. So this is where some stories might need a more systematic approach, where you start with something more broad and then build into it. Let's see, final things. Yeah, we'll go into the word count. I'll show you that one. Oh, another big one. Can you make changes to your paper at any time? Yes. So after you've submitted your paper, as long as you haven't turned in the final draft, you can make changes anytime. You can take out your part of your thesis and your paragraph and decide you want to change the subject, or you want to change the tone or your wording. You can change up the structure anytime you feel will give you a better grade for the rubric. So always go back to the rubric. What's the best way to get the grades? And finally, at the end of the document, I have this. And so this is great. You can just open this up. I'll show you briefly. So this is just the MLA. Check this. It will give you like a little checklist to make sure that you're not going to lose points on something not being spaced or Times New Roman or 12 font just go through it after you've written like your first draft and then second draft, final draft. Just double check some of these things to make sure that nothing is out of place. Okay, now with that, let's go ahead and look at a rough draft. So here is a rough draft. And so I put the outline into chat, and then I generated an essay within the word count, and then I changed it up a little bit to add a few things. So the first thing is MLA format. Make sure you have your last name in the header. So you need to add that in. Oh, also you can, in order to bring this up, just to put this up there. So make sure you come over here to Google Drive, hit New, Google Docs, from a template. All right, and it'll open this up. So MLA, make sure that you use this template document. You don't absolutely have to, but it will make things a little easier that it's got a lot of things set up. If you don't see it right here, come down to the bottom under Education, and you should see it and you can load it if it's not already available. So just so we got that. Okay, so I got name. I haven't given a title yet. Something that can be done later. I can just say the right. You can just keep it really simple. I think the title will serve two purposes. One is to check on your essay as you're reading it to make sure you know the subject matter, like what is this essay, or remind you, and you're like, oh yeah, it's about Gilgamesh. Okay. And then the second reason for a title is just when you're looking up your work later on, old papers, catching the title will help remind you what your paper was about before you read it. So something along those lines. So it has some good points. As I generated it did help actually come up with some different parts that we haven't actually read just yet either. So his pursuit of wisdom, that's something we're going to read in the flood. So it had some points. It gets a little flowery. I would go in and change some of these terms. I changed a few already. Like this word here, it generated was quintessential, which was not a term you need to be using. So timeless, keep it simple. Make sure that when people are reading this, like your peers, that they will understand and that you're not getting caught up in too many words just to sound smart. You want to just sound like you. And here is the rough essay. Yeah, this is how long it'll kind of look overall. And to check your word count, so after you've written your first draft, you can come up here to Tools, and you can hit Control-Shift-C. As you can see here, it is 267 words, so it falls within it. You can also do this as you're writing. So, and it'll display it down here in the bottom. Now the word count does not include the header up here, your name and date. It also does not include the works cited. So just double check that you get over that 250 words. Also, this is the works cited. I'm going to make sure you guys have this in class, especially for our first essay, because it will be a little complicated and we don't want to be losing points at this point following up on those kinds of things. So we will go through the works cited. And right now we're just citing the one source. That will be more than enough to keep us on track with our essays. So it has the translator, the story within the book, the title of the textbook, who published it, the year it was published, 2003, and then the pages, the page range that we are discussing within the textbook. So I think that's mostly it. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll begin writing the first draft, and we'll go through it. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you all next time. That's the conclusion of my lecture, and I hope you guys are doing well. So Godspeed.